Okay, let's call to order the Harris Ranch Community Infrastructure District Number 1 Board Meeting of October 5th. Could I get a roll call, please?
Clegg,
Here.
Thompson,
Here.
Woodings,
Here.
all present.
That's for approval of the minutes.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the minutes of the Harris Ranch Community Infrastructure District Number 1 regular meeting September 7th and special meeting September 14th, 2021.
Second,
Roll call, please.
Clegg,
yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Okay, moving on to agenda items. The first item of business is executive session. I'll ask for,
Mr. Chair, I move that we go into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061F pending or probable litigation.
Second,
roll call, please.
Clegg,
yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Okay, we will take a recess for executive session.
Or should be, or shouldn't be.
Right.
Right. Oh, oops.
Okay, let's call this Harris Ranch Community Infrastructure District Number 1 Board Meeting for October 5th back into session and begin with agenda item number 2, HRCID 12-2021 Staff Report by David Hasegabla.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the purpose of today's meeting is for the board of the Harris Ranch Community Infrastructure District Number 1 to consider whether the projects or to consider whether to approve the purchase of 3 projects and whether to approve a bond resolution that would fund the purchase of these 3 projects. These approvals will be done via resolution. This meeting is not a public hearing. The board will not hear oral testimony today, but will instead consider the staff report provided to the board and the letters that have been sent in by the stakeholders of the district, which are all included within the staff report. Based on recent questions and comments from residents of the district, I would like to take a moment to clarify the roles of the district, the city, and the developer. The district is a political subdivision of the state of Idaho and is distinct, separate, and apart from the city. The district was created in 2010 upon the submission of a petition. The developer is a third entity separate and apart from the city and separate and apart from the district. The developer constructs community infrastructure projects and submits those improvements to the district for consideration and, if approved by the board, purchase. The district issues general obligation bonds that are repaid via tax levy. Proceeds of the district's general obligation bonds are used to fund the purchase of the board approved projects. It is this process that we will be conducting today. Before we go into the details of the current projects submitted for consideration, let's quickly go over the major events that have led us up to today. On June 22nd, 2021, the board held a budget workshop where guidance for the financial direction of the district was given. The board heard alternative budgetary directions and directed staff to prepare the budget in the same fashion as previous years. On July 20th, 2021, the board read and heard testimony from residents in a public hearing, primarily expressing objection to the projects that are being considered today. In that meeting, the board approved the budget, which included the capacity to pay debt service on a new general obligation bond up to $5.2 million and the refinance of the special assessment bond. On September 7th, 2021, the board approved the tax levy for the budget. During this time, the board has also received several letters from the HRCID Taxpayers Association and numerous letters from district residents expressing concern and objections to the district, its constitutionality, procedures, and the prospective project purchases. The association has informed district staff that if a project resolution and/or bond resolution is approved by the board, it will challenge the board decisions in court. The board has engaged Givens Pursley to help advise the board in these matters. With that context set, let us review the 2 resolutions before the board for consideration today. The first resolution, HRCID 12-2021, has 3 sections. Each section represents one of the 3 projects that the developer has submitted to the district for purchase. Although I will go through each project in succession, the board will make a single vote on the full resolution. The board can amend the resolution to approve or reject projects in whole or in part. On September 23rd, 2021, the district published a notice on its webpage with the project descriptions, objections, counter arguments, and the letters that have been submitted so far. The district has since published additional materials from the association, the developer, residents, and other stakeholders as they came in. I would like to thank Bill Doyle and Heath Clark and the many residents who took the time to share their viewpoints and arguments for and against what is being considered today. And thank you to everyone who showed up today to participate in this process. Last Thursday, the district staff sent the board the staff report that went over the background of each of the prospective projects, including the objections of the association, the counter arguments from the developer, and an analysis from the district staff with recommendations. One important point to note, the association has raised many objections, not only to these 3 projects. Some of the objections fall outside of the scope of what the board will consider today. For example, issues of the district creation or the eligibility of past projects for purchase is not being considered today. With the stage set, let's examine the projects themselves. There are 3 projects before the board today. Certain other projects have either been removed or, in the case of the conservation easement, will be considered by the board after the district has had a chance to conduct further review, including an independent appraisal review. Section 1 of the project resolution relates to project GO 21-1, a request from the developer to pay for accrued interest on 24 projects that have been purchased by the district in previous years. The price to be paid is approximately $1.4 million. The development agreement between the city, the developer, and the district allows interest to accrue between the completion of a project and its purchase. The association has raised several objections to this purchase request. Their objections are summarized in the staff report and can be found in Exhibit EE of the staff report. The developer submitted counter arguments to the association's objections, and those can be found in Exhibit FF of the staff report. The staff have reviewed the project and find that it meets the requirements of the Cid Act and the development agreement. Staff therefore recommend that the board approve this project. Section 2 of the project resolution relates to project GO 21-2, and this project is comprised of roadways, sidewalks, storm drains, sanitary sewer, streetlights, and other related costs within the Dallas Harris Estates Townhomes Number 9 subdivision. The cost of this project is approximately $1.7 million. Because the objections and counter arguments to this and the next project are grouped together, I'm going to move on to the next project. Section 3 of the project resolution relates to project GO 21-3, and this project comprises the construction of roadways, sidewalks, storm drains, sanitary sewer, streetlights, and stormwater pond improvements and other related costs within the Dallas Harris Estates Townhomes Number 11 subdivision. The cost for this project is approximately $4 million. The association objections can be found in Exhibit M, and the developer counter arguments can be found in Exhibit Q. And before I move into the staff's actual analysis, I did want to pause and see if the board had any questions so far. Okay. So staff have analyzed the development agreement. On the screen, you can see, let's see, actually, I just realized, I'm not sure that.
I apologize. Are you supposed to have had a presentation going on?
Yeah, and Greg, if we could get that up on the screen, I apologize to folks.
Sorry, Councilmember Woodings mentioned to me, but I thought you were just reading a presentation. Thank you. Does someone? Assist.
I'll pause here for a moment while Shar takes a look. It's just a blank screen so far. Folks, I apologize. I got caught up and did not realize that it was not up there for you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
David, you're doing such a great job. I didn't even miss that you didn't have a presentation, except I saw you clicking through it and I was like, I think there's supposed to be something there. So,
All right, it looks like it's up on the screen now. Thank you, thank you. So on the screen, you can see the requirements of the development agreement. And staff have analyzed that development agreement and found that all the applicable requirements have been provided by the developer. And the staff report lists out, itemizes each of those requirements. The district staff also looked into whether the projects meet the eligibility criteria of the CID Act. Those three requirements are that there be a substantial nexus to the district, that there be a direct or indirect benefit to the district, and that the improvements are not fronting individual single-family residential lots. The district staff found that all three of these criteria were met. I will give the highlights on those reasons. The staff report contains the more detailed analysis. The first item is substantial nexus. The term substantial has been defined as important, essential, or considerable in quantity. The term nexus is defined as a connection or link in the standard dictionary definition, or a connection or link, often a causal one in Black's Law Dictionary. All the roadways are linked and located within the district, and that is within projects GO 21-2 and projects GO 21-3. We found that the nexus of the roadways was substantial due to their location in the mixed use area of the district, and because there are linkages between East Park Center Boulevard and East Warm Springs Avenue, as well as because of the north-south coverage of those roadways. The substantiality of the stormwater ponds was due to the large coverage area within the district provided by those stormwater ponds. And you can, oh, we lost it. When the map comes back up, you'll see that the green roadways are the roadways that are being considered for those projects, and that the stormwater ponds is the green section in the south. And Greg, it does look like we lost the screen share again. Okay, it's back up. So the green areas are the roadways that are under consideration, and there are yellow areas that are either improvements that are going to be submitted in the future, or the large yellow area in the south is the GO 20-7, the conservation easement that will be considered later. I'm going to move on to the next slide, and this is the coverage area for the two stormwater ponds that are part of project GO 21-3, that is townhomes number 11. So the pink area is the area that those stormwater ponds serve within the district. As you can tell, there is a large area that is covered that the district staff found to be substantial. The CID Act also requires that there be a direct or indirect benefit to the district. The roadways and the stormwater ponds are absolutely required as part of the development of the district and provide a direct benefit. Finally, the last eligibility requirement is that improvements fronting individual single-family residential lots are excluded. At issue is the definition of fronting. Unfortunately, the CID Act does not define this term. The association takes the position of using the plain language interpretation of in front of. This interpretation would make the exclusion broader. That is, improvements that are excluded, it would broaden the amount of improvements that are excluded from eligibility. The developer argues that the fronting should be interpreted in the context of zoning. In that context, Boise City Code interprets fronting as abutting or touching. District staff reviewed many legal definitions where fronting requires some sort of immediate adjacency or physical contact between parcels of land. District staff also determined that fronting should follow the developmental interpretation because of the context of the CID Act. District staff determined that the improvements are not fronting individual single-family residential lots. With that said, however, if the board wants to follow the association's interpretation, then it could adopt the association's position that fronting means in front of and amend the resolution to approve only the portions of roadways that are not in front of townhomes. In conclusion, it is the recommendation of district staff that the board approve all three projects in full as provided in the resolution. This concludes my remarks for the project resolution, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that presentation. It was very thorough and it was very helpful. I think I'd open this up to questions from my fellow board members to David and/or open the conversation to the motion.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, please.
I first want to comment on the quality of the staff report that we received. It was very thorough. It included all the comments. And it was really informative, had great analysis. So I really appreciate that. And to that end, I don't have any questions, but I will start with a motion for discussion. I would like to move that we approve HR CID 12-2021, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Harris Ranch Community Infrastructure District, Ada County, Idaho, making certain findings and determinations with respect to certain community infrastructure projects within the district, providing for related matters and providing an effective date.
Second,
Second.
discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first of all, I'd like to thank everyone who sent us comments, who provided ideas about where the infrastructure district should go in the future. As I read my role as an infrastructure district board member, my role today is very narrow, and that is to rule whether or not the three projects that were presented by staff that are before us are eligible for reimbursement through the infrastructure district. Do they meet the findings necessary to meet the requirements in the CID Act? And if they do they also meet the requirements of the development agreement, which defined which projects within this particular development we could reimburse? In reading the very thorough staff report on those three very specific issues, it's clear from my reading of it that the staff has done a thorough analysis. I agree with their analysis and recommendation that these three projects in fact are eligible for reimbursement under the CID Act.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. I too want to thank everyone who took the time to reach out to us, and for the purposes of this meeting, I think it's really important, as my fellow board member said, that we understand the scope of what we're doing here today, which is reviewing the projects for reimbursement and looking at a bond resolution. So I know that a lot has been brought up throughout the previous months, but that's not what our role here is today. We are required by state statute and the CID Act to act as board members in this regard. And so that's what we're looking at. So while I thank everyone for their input on matters unrelated to this meeting, we are keeping our scope very slim here for that reason. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Clegg and Board Member Woodings. And before I call a roll call, I will also add my 2 cents. I greatly appreciate all the input that we have received to date. It's been very thorough. I've reviewed everything we have received to date. And I too am inclined to support the staff report and staff recommendations. We are required to follow the CID statute, and I believe it is quite clear that these projects meet the CID Act. And again, I support the staff recommendations and all the work that's gone into them. Roll call, please.
Clegg,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, we will move on to item number 3, HRCID 1320-21. I'll turn it over to you again, David. Thank you.
All right. Well, Mr. Chair, members of the board, my remarks on this item will be brief. The second resolution is a bond resolution that will support a bond that would purchase the projects in question from the previous resolution, as well as any projects previously approved. We had an initial offer from Zions Bank to purchase the bonds, and Zions Bank has reaffirmed that offer. It has provided an updated term sheet that was sent to you all earlier today, and that term sheet will also be included as part of the meeting minutes. The rate of the bond can be locked in 14 to 30 days in advance of closing, and the rate will be based on the 10-year constant treasury plus 0.68%, and it is subject to a floor of 2.22%. The size of the bond itself will depend on the rate on the day of closing, and will probably be a little under $5 million. The bond resolution authorizes the issuance of the bond subject to certain parameters. Those parameters are, number one, the principal amount of the bond cannot exceed $5.2 million. The interest rate on the bond, as measured by true interest cost, cannot exceed 3.5% per annum. And the final maturity of the bond cannot exceed 30 years, but is expected to have a 15-year maturity. Those are the major points of the bond resolution. Based on the need for funding for the 3 projects considered under the project resolution, it is staff's recommendation that the board approve this resolution. And that concludes my prepared remarks for the bond resolution. I'll stand for any questions.
Thanks again, David. I will open this up to my fellow board members to any questions of David, or if they prefer, make a motion and have discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Please.
I move that we approve HRCID 13-2021, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Harris Ranch Community Infrastructure District, authorizing the issuance and sale of a general obligation bond in one or more series in the principal amount of up to $5.2 million, providing for the date, form, maturities, designation, registration, and authentication of the bond, providing for related matters, and providing an effective date.
You hear a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, again, similarly to what was before us on the first resolution, we have a narrow scope today. And certainly, while I have read all of the comments that we've gotten to date from everyone, have understood all of those comments, what is before us today is whether or not, now that we have found 3 projects eligible for reimbursement that are worth more than the amount that we can bond for, whether or not we should go ahead and issue a bond so that we can begin reimbursement of those projects. And as I look at the CID Act and my responsibilities as a board member under that act, it would be the responsible action to go ahead and issue those bonds once we found those projects eligible for reimbursement. And for that reason, I will be supporting this motion.
Any further discussion? I'm in agreement with Board Member Clegg, and roll call, please.
Clegg,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
With no further business, ask for a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.